to compute. Cool. So, Danielle, so it's so I don't know why I went Danielle, nice, so nice to see you. So I was telling them about basically Danielle is a casting director. She has her own company where she does casting, and she has worked for television and film and animation as well. Is that
A
correct?
lot of animation,
A
yeah.
lot of
And
animation.
theater. What I just came from was theater.
So do you want to tell them a little about your
Yeah,
background?
totally. So my name is Danielle Demchick. I use she, her pronouns. I have been a casting director. I've been in casting for 20 years this year, which is crazy. So I started in the industry as a kid actor. So I was exposed to casting as, when I was starting at age 7 by going on auditions and all of that kind of stuff. I always loved being on the other. I was always curious what they did on the other side. So I really wanted to be a casting director, basically, as soon as I knew it was a thing you could be. And then I interned and, worked as an assistant, moved my way up. I worked in independent film initially. The first project I worked on was The Good Shepherd with Robert De Niro. And then I worked on A Guide to Recognizing Your Saints with Shia LaBeouf and Channing Tatum. That was probably my second movie. And then I stayed in independent film for a little bit. Then I went to a talent agency, which is like being on the other side, representing actors as an assistant. And then from there, I went back to independent film, and then I was at Nickelodeon for over 14 years. So that was my casting home for a long time. I was there from 2008 to 2022, and I left in 2022, almost 3 years ago now. Next month will be 3 years since I opened my own office, and they are one of my biggest clients. Is Nickelodeon, is all of the Viacom Kids and Family brand content, and then I also do a lot of work with other kids and family brands, and I do both live action and animation, and then I do a lot of independent film as well, which, like I said, was what I kind of got my start in. And then I kind of do whatever comes my way. So my focus is on underrepresented communities on both sides of the camera. And a lot of my work is disability centric because disability is the most underrepresented and misrepresented community on both sides of the camera. But the play that I'm casting that I just came from it's actually, it was a really interesting room to be in. My casting associate and I were the only people not of trans experience that were on the creative team. So that's another really big part of the work that I do. And also, a big focus of mine is intersectionality so that because nobody is one identity. So, you know, people in that room were people of color and people of trans experience, people with disabilities and people with trans experience on both sides of the table, actually, both the director and the actors we saw. So that's really important to me that people see themselves represented on both sides of the table. And I know where we are in the world. Like, there's not always going to be a casting director with my credits necessarily who is a member of that community. So what I do is I always bring someone, I always attempt, if there's not someone on the creative team at least, to bring someone from the community in to work with me. Um, and sometimes they're, depending on what level they are, but I often give someone the opportunity to have their first associate credit or something because I don't want them to just be an assistant to me. I want them to be a voice at the table and a creative contributing force. So that's really important to me and my process. But everybody works differently with that sort of stuff. And every project has different budgets and different expectations of how many casting professionals can be in the room and all of that. But since I've left to open my own office, that remains a really big part of my work and a big part of the stuff I try to put out there in terms of creating access also to casting as a profession, that I think it's really important that people know what we do because it's kind of like this unknown entity of what, how, all of that kind of stuff that we do. And I really love it. So I love to be able to tell people about it and tell people about what we do and what the process is and all of that.
It's so cool. Guide to Saints, Ditto Montiel,
Yeah.
has come to our festival many times because he grew up in Astoria,
Yep.
and the movie was based in Astoria, and he just kind of
Yep.
like contacted me one day and was like, "I'm coming to your festival." I was like, "Oh,
That's cool.
okay, cool." And then he's been consistently coming back. So
Yeah, I mean, that was a really interesting process because he really wanted people that were very real and felt like they could have really grown up there. Um, but you also need people that can act. And
Yes.
he really wanted us like doing street casting and like going on the subway and doing all of that. And he had a lot of concerns about Shia LaBeouf playing that role because at that time Shia LaBeouf was really known for Disney and like all of the, kind of that type of content, not like I mean now obviously we know him to be a little bit edgier, but that was not who he was at that time. And he really wanted to do that work and kind of prove that he could do that. So, which I think he did. I mean, I think he was
Yeah,
amazing in the
definitely.
movie. And I thought the movie was really great. It was like a really like disappointing um to me it was really sorry, I thought my silent thing was on and it's not. So let me fix that. It's really disappointing to me that like it didn't get more love because let me turn my camera on and off because it just froze. But I think he's an interesting filmmaker to work with. Mine is my camera keep freezing. Okay, I think it's better.
Yeah, I would think so. I know he just finished a project with like a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, yeah. But he was like wanted us doing street casting, which is a different type of casting. So there is something called street casting where like there are those people on the street that'll like see somebody in a park and go up to them and be like, you have a cool look. That's usually not for a movie. I mean, some people do that as a for a there's a few casting directors that are known for that. But in general, it's more of like a commercial or print thing. Let's see. Yeah, and then in terms of concerns, also exactly. So especially when it comes to working with minors, which is something that I have a lot of experience with, obviously having been at Nickelodeon for so long, going up to somebody and being like, would you
Yeah, I want
believe
to
somebody?
cast your kid.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy and weird. It's not to say it doesn't happen or that you don't meet people weird ways. Like I totally forgot how I met this kid, but her mom reminded me, like, I heard her singing in Central Park, like, I mean, at like a stage, like
Right,
something
right.
planned, but that I was like, that she's amazing. Like she should, and now she was just in this commercial. I don't know if you've seen it's getting a lot of love right now. It's the or I guess it might be technically a PSA. It's the No Decision Without Us with the girl with Down syndrome singing.
Oh, okay, yes.
So she's the lead girl in that, and I knew she was a star. Like, and that sometimes happens. And sometimes that's not really street casting if someone's performing on a stage, but still, like, it could be a school play or something like that. And
Right.
that's, but to go up to a kid or someone, it's a little bit can be a little bit icky, I think.
Yes.
And my boss at the time was really concerned about it because that was shortly after the people that were street cast from Kids, that movie
Mm.
Kids. A few of them had had like major mental health stuff like years later, and this was years later. This was, the early 2000s. And I think one of them had recently committed suicide because it's just like you're not prepared for that life in the spotlight necessarily that and you don't have the acting training either. So it's like you go from having this one role that you are great in and you get all of this attention potentially, and then you're not
No.
going to book anything. Yeah,
So what can you give us a little how about how the casting process goes? You mentioned that it would
sure.
be different, but
Yeah, so it's different depending on the medium, and it's all like whether it's TV, film, live action, animation, short form, like if you're watching shorts versus long form, like there's a lot of like, differences depending on exactly what it is. But the thing with casting is we are part of the creative process. So ideally, we're brought in as soon as you have a script and you have a budget to start hiring actors. Sometimes we get brought in, there's already an attachment, which is like having an actor already attached to it. So, say like you wrote a script with someone in mind and you have like an in to them because it's really based on their story or you've worked with them before, you might attach them as a filmmaker before casting comes on. But ideally, we're a part of the whole process. So, like filmmakers I work with will bring me in and be like, hey, I have this idea about attaching like to give you kind of like a working example, there's a film that I'm working on called The Flash Before the Bang. That's a deaf filmmaker, and his brother is the producer, and they're both deaf. So it's a deaf-led project, a deaf writer, director, and his brother is the lead producer. So within the deaf community, there's a lot, it's not a big community, so people are likely to know each other. So when I came onto the movie, there was already a lead attached because they're friends with Russell Harvard. They said, "Hey, we want you to play this role." Then from there, they were like, "What do you think about going to me?" Like they had me part of it. Once they had that one attachment, they got some what you would call seed money, where they could bring in a casting director. So then they would say to me, like, "We're friends with all of these other deaf creatives. What do you think about bringing Daniel Durant from Coda in?" I said, "That's great. I'm so glad you're already like thinking that way. I support that." His agent is one of my best friends. I was actually texting with her on my walk home from callbacks because I was like, "I'm thinking of you. I'm right outside your apartment. We should get together." So like that's how close we are. And I was like, "Go, like pursue it without me." Like we were still in the terms of making my deal and everything. And I was like, "Daniel's your friend. I'm just supporting it as I want to be the casting director on this project and I love him, and tell the agent you're working with me because that'll only help you seal the deal." And then from there, once we were talking about other people to kind of bring in and how to, like round out the cast, but it's a project, it's a unique project in the sense that it's based on a true story. So we're casting people that are based on real people. And then also that there is a very big deaf culture component, that we need a certain number of people that are deaf. We need one actor because it's based off a true story who's deaf blind, which is usually somebody who has it's a very specific disability that they have. Usually it's Usher syndrome that causes that. There are other things as well. And then we also needed some actors that could sign, that were hearing actors. So my job is to then brainstorm like, okay, like maybe it's not something every casting director would know, but again, that's why it's my niche and people come to me for certain things, just like they would go to somebody else for something else. I know that certain actors, either they're codas themselves, children of deaf adults, or they have a sibling who's deaf, or they learned to sign for another movie so they could sign well enough that if we kind of got them some training, they could really do well. Um, Cameron Manheim, for example, is an actor who's like a working actor who happened to used to work as a sign language interpreter. Then there's also been people who've just kind of expressed an interest in that community. So kind of keeping all of that stuff in mind as we look to shape the cast. Also, like talking to agents and saying, like, do you have like an actor that you represent who's really looking for a challenge? And with that movie, we oddly enough, did. We found Jessica Alba, wanted to learn how to sign. She was really fascinated by it and decided to go in head first. She wanted to learn ASL, taking like, I don't know, like 15 hours a week of ASL training
Wow.
to for 3 months was the plan. But it's an independent film, and sometimes independent films lose financing or things change. So our dates ended up changing, and she was no longer available for the movie. So she invested all of this time. She didn't do the full training in sign language, but she learned a lot, and she was like really good. Like I was in a meeting with her, and I was shocked because some people are just good with languages. It's a skill set just like other, if it's just like if you were to watch something, you're like, wow, I never knew that actor could dance. They might
Right.
have never danced before, but they learned to dance because they had rhythm and they could do that. So that's, part of our job as well, is sort of assessing like, does someone want to take on a challenge or do something that maybe is a little bit out of their wheelhouse? Um, Someone like Jessica Alba doesn't need the money. She's one of the richest people that there are because of Honest Brands and other things. And she wants to act. Like she wanted a role where she could like sink her teeth in. And I thought it was really cool. We were really excited about it. But again, it's like you can't until the film is in the can, like things happen, things change. So we had to like rejigger all of that casting wise, and we kind of rethought the creative, which is like another thing that's casting specific, can be a part of casting, was like, how do we keep all of the rest of the cast intact, but add someone to the movie that knows how to sign and is going to be available within X amount of weeks when our dates were going to be, because they wouldn't have, even if they were studying ASL all night, every night, they weren't going to learn. So we kind of rejiggered things and we put someone in that maybe didn't have the star power of Jessica Alba in that role. And we made another role like our star vehicle because we needed that for financing. So which ended up kind of working out almost better because it was a role that only shot for like 5 days. It was a lot more open. It could be any gender, any age between 40 to 75. Like it was very broad.
Mhm.
Um, and it could have been any ethnicity. So we'd initially had, my gosh, I see him, but I'm like, this is how long it's been. Terry, what is Terry's last name?
Cruise?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I was like, maybe cruise?
Yeah, so Terry Crews was going to do it, and then date stuff happened and he wasn't available, but we had like worked out all of his riders, everything, because he has to work out every day. He starts his day at like 3:30 if he has to be on set at 6 a.m.
Oh,
It was like
wow.
a whole thing. So, and we ended up booking Kevin James. Totally different way to go. But he
No
loved it.
workouts.
Yeah, no workouts. He's actually much thinner than he was thin, and he's not as thin, but yes, but
I'm
yeah,
teasing, I'm teasing.
no, but yeah, but it was interesting, just like totally a different way to go. Um, but it was great. And he loved being like exposed to ASL and learning a little bit of ASL. And he ended up like signing in parts of the movie where there's like he's supposed to be someone who's like anti this deaf school staying around, which was like a cultural thing in the 80s with oralism and trying to make people that were deaf talk as opposed to sign. And so there's like this little moment where he like warms to the school and like signs to the principal, which is just like a beautiful moment that he like connects. But he wanted to learn how to do that. That was like really important to him. So, we're kind of in sometimes with casting, we're involved in the whole process. Like that's a movie where like I sign off with the directors and they say, I love you. I mean, we have like it's like a family at this point, but they would be sending me dailies every day. So it's kind of like being a producer. Other projects, I cast it, I'm done. I hope it gets nominated for an Emmy. Not that I don't love them, but again, it's just every process is different. Just like any part of filmmaking, like, in some projects you're going to be producing, but you're also going to be doing some editing, you're going to be doing some writing, like you're going to be doing some coordinating of the sound designer getting hired, even though you're a producer at this level versus that level. It's kind of all hands on deck with casting. Another thing we often do is making sure that the talents, all of their needs are being met. So it's like if they need a particular type of hairdresser, if they are a person of color, or if they are deaf, that they have a preferred sign language interpreter, that that person is there. So we work really closely with the producers from like the logistical standpoint element, and then with the director in terms of making sure their vision is being met and making sure like their vision is being met, but also keeping our budget in check. They
Right.
can't have every person they want for every day of the shoot. Sometimes special, and I do a lot of work with, earlier in their career filmmakers because again, I love working with people from underrepresented communities. Historically, we have not seen a ton of women from women directors and then underrepresented communities of women or people of trans experience directing. So like the room I was just in 10 years ago, that probably wouldn't have been a director. So sometimes she'll turn to me for certain things and I'm like, you've got this. Like, why are you asking me that? Like I know you've got this, but there's a rapport that we have from working together for several years that, there's like a different relationship than maybe if it was somebody who had never worked with me before, who's like just going to kind of come in and ask me to cast the project and then kindly move on with my role.
What have you, how does like animation differ from live action in terms of
So
casting?
yeah, so animation is in some ways more flexible because it's like, who is a purple octopus? Is it a 5-year-old girl? Is it a man? Could it be all of these things? Um, but also there is typically they want to animate to the voices that you cast. So we cast really early. So like with a film or a play, I'm probably casting today and they might start rehearsing next week. With animation, or not rehearsing, I should say, shooting next week, and hopefully it'll air and it'll get distribution and everything will happen within like a year or so, 2 years. With animation, it's like So I just worked on Wonder Pets Into the City, which is the new Wonder Pets. To give you an idea of the timeline, and this was a fast one for animation. I was in labor with my daughter listening to auditions, and it came out 3 days after her second birthday. And that was a fast project. There was no pilot.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's no pilot. There was no pilot
And that
process.
was the
So normal,
fast one.
and that's fast. Yeah. So like trying to think like, and then I guess like I work on Super Kitties. That was another pretty fast one. But most animation, it's like years and years. There's some stuff now, like I've worked on that's di a different style of animation where they're able to do certain things faster, but especially in preschool where there's a curriculum, it's like it has to go through testing and do all of these different levels of being ready for air. It's not just like making sure that the animation is locked and the sound is good. It's like making sure that whatever curriculum we're hitting, whether that's like social emotional learning or it's STEM or it's science related, where if they say a word wrong, we have to go back in and re-record it. So there's like so many different levels of time that it all takes. But like that Wonder Pets was literally 2022 to 2024. And then that it premiered and I was working on that season from no, I started in November 2022 and I finished in July, casting wise, in July 2024. But there's still, I was at another record for a Netflix animated project that I just did, and they were like, oh, we're still doing pickups for some of the episodes. Like the cast is coming in, like you'll see them here later. And I was like, what? So it takes a really long time with animation, any sort of animation, whether that's a feature, a series, long form series, short form series, unless it's done under like some of this faster technology and there isn't a curriculum. If there isn't a curriculum or there's no music, sometimes it's a lot faster.
Yeah, I think one of the issues we had, well, I know one of the issues we had in launching Noggin back in the day was the difference between Nickelodeon's turnaround time and Sesame's turnaround time because of all the focus testing and the researchers and all of that.
Yeah, and
The
it's an
two were not
interesting.
happy with each other's processes.
Yeah, it's a weird landscape now in terms of the interesting curriculum versus like it just being fun content. And there was just an article that came out about YouTube trying to like tighten the what's allowed for kids' content and making sure
Yes,
it's
I
high
saw
enough
that.
quality. So like it's an ever-changing thing with that, but animation just always takes time.
Definitely. What, any questions before we move on?
And I'll just kind of tell you, like when we get started working with a project, what we do is we read the script, obviously, we, look at the characters. Ideally, the director gives us an or producer or director and producer and writer give us an idea of the characters that we're casting for. So like, I'm pulling something up that's I'm having my concept meeting on tomorrow. So like she's white. She's an alternative girly with piercings and tattoos who's never felt like she belongs in her small East Texas town. She's above it all. She has low vision and uses a white cane as needed, but she's a bartender, so she has enough sight to do that job. So like very specific. Like that is very specific. Other times it's just like they're, the girl next door. They are best friends with whoever. But this is like, hyper specific. Both ideas or concepts or ways we have things delivered have pros and cons. Like I'm going to go into this meeting tomorrow and be like, well, I'm very excited that we're, all feeling great about this person being, oh, my camera, being low vision. But like, who's to say who can be a bartender or who, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So those are always like specifics that um we have to talk about because you don't want to you don't want to box out the ability to cast the role. But it's also good to have some specificity because just to give you an idea, depending on what the project is that I'm casting, if it's like a full budget type of role for an actor and it's like not specific, we get, 1,000 submissions to go through of headshots and resumes. And then from there, if I ask people to tape, it's like if I ask 300 people to tape, figure out of 1,000, that would be a lot. I'd probably get 100 tapes back. We always have like, since the days of self-tapes, I'd say we have, like two-thirds drop off of people that say they're going to tape. And some of those people are passing. They're telling us they're not interested in the project. Other people say they're going to tape and they don't. Some people, things happen, life comes up. I get it. But just to give you an idea of like the numbers. But for a role as specific as this, she's white. She needs to be an LA local hire for this project because that's what the budget calls for. And she needs to not read as blind, basically, or too blind, not to be, but that's what they're saying. I'm hoping I have 5 tapes to share just to give you that idea. So it's a real range. How often do actors have to learn a new skill? So that's a great question. It wouldn't be through casting. It would be like we wouldn't need to see it necessarily in your audition, but it would be something like, are you open to learning? Some skills we would need to know that you have some ability, like probably with ASL, we'd want to do like one coaching session before we locked you in casting wise and just have, and it would be an interesting coaching session for the actor. So it'd be with if they were doing it right, like if I was casting it, it would be with a deaf individual. So someone whose first language is sign language, and then an interpreter to interpret between the two. And the actor would work with that deaf individual, and then they would meet with me and the director and the producer afterwards to kind of talk about like, did we feel like they were getting it or was the learning curve too great? Like we wouldn't expect them to come out with any like grasp of the language, but it would be like, does it seem like they can do this? Same with something like dance. So like I've worked on a lot of dance projects. Some of them have been casting dancers. Some of them have been casting actors who are like learning how to dance in the project. But like we need to know that you can dance to a degree or you have rhythm, you don't have 2 left feet. So we would do some sort of a dance call with you, but we wouldn't be like, and a 1 and a 2 and a 1, 2, 3. Now you got to do this choreography and it's going to be shown anywhere. Like it's just, and it might even not be taped depending on the level of the actor, because we might not want there to be that pressure of them thinking it could leak, especially in today's day and age. So that's kind of, there's different, and same with the sign language thing. We wouldn't tape that. It would just be like a private kind of confidential, doing just like a little bit of a test of what we can expect from that person and what maybe they can do. Um, but we wouldn't expect you to like come in having that skill set. Same with singing. Like if you wanted like sign language wise, I know like the girl who played the hearing role in Coda, the daughter who was hearing, like she didn't sign before, but I think they probably did what I described to kind of figure out what she could do. Um, and then is there a set due date when casting has to be done? Yes. But often we pad that as much as we can, and things change at the 11th hour. Like I had something where I got an email at like 3:45 today that someone can't be on set tomorrow because their kid is sick and we need to recast. Like, and I had somebody kind of in the wings that I was like, it might be available, but I don't know if they're going to be available. And we've been playing phone tag. So like, let's get someone that we don't need to go through their agent. We can just like a friend of the producer basically who said they would do it. Like because at the 11th hour we we're going to lose money if we don't have that body on set. We can change the creative a little bit to fit the person that we cast. It wasn't so hyper specific, but like if we don't have somebody there, like we can't shoot the episode. So there is stuff we do to hopefully not be in that situation, but things happen. Like I had a situation once where I was in jury duty and I had someone going to set, and on the way there, I'm trying to remember who, but it was either like their dad, someone had a heart attack and the mom had to turn around. And I couldn't replace the person on set. Like they made it work, but like they like what are you going to do? Life happens and we get that. But if something happens at 3:48 the night before or the day before and I can get someone there, we're obviously going to like do our best to do that. So We build in, we make it happen the best we can, but life can happen. How do you navigate through casting for a super specific role? So a lot of what I do is a lot of grassroots outreach and kind of keeping lists of people when I find certain people. Like if I people reach out to me on social media where they're like, "Hey, I'm a person that tap dances that's low vision." And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna probably need you for something. Like let me write that down. So I have like, a running Google sheet of things like that. And then when I say grassroots outreach, that would be like reaching out to dance schools and saying, do you have anybody who dances who's low vision? Reaching out to the American Federation for Americans that are blind. It's like a weird name like that. It's like AFAB, but like they've posted things for me. So having those sort of connections. Other skill sets could be like juggling. And I'm going out to an agent and they're like, I don't know if my clients can juggle. I'm like, well, send an email. That's not something where I'm going to do the grassroots outreach, but sometimes it's on someone's resume, but often it's a lie, even when it's on their resume. Um, People put things on the resume that shouldn't be on the resume. But
I'm,
yes,
I'm
there
putting juggling now. As soon as we get off, I'm putting juggling.
exactly. It's like, what? And people are like, what? Why do you think I juggle? I'm like, because it's on your resume. Um, but that's kind of what we do is we work with the agents, but then and then also if it's something super specific like identity wise or skill set wise, we either go to like training programs for that. Social media is honestly like a huge help when it comes to super specific casting because like we didn't have that for years, like that wasn't a thing. Like
Yes.
when I started, it was just like calling agents, calling schools, um,
I was trying to
talking to
explain the
casting
concept
director
of a
friends.
Rolodex to them last week, and
Yes, basically, yeah. I mean, people had Rolodexes, especially casting directors. That was like a thing. You needed it to like have that possibility of finding that person.
Jonas says, how do you define star quality and how do you identify it in someone?
So it's just like something you feel. Like there's not like one thing you can say. Like this callback session I just came from, like this one person just was like a star. Like, and they did not come in as the front runner. I don't think. I mean, I don't know who was the front runner. I think we all kind of had different front runners, but like we left all feeling the same way. Like that person just brought something to the role that we none of us had ever like expected to see. And it was a chemistry read, which means we had an actor that's already cast and they were in the room reading with all of our actors that came in for their callback today. And we asked that actor, like, what did you feel? And like she's been a part of this project since it was like in early development. She's like, I found things like in my that I could bring to my performance that nobody else I'd read with could help me, I'd never felt or could bring. So like having that kind of like a different point of view that makes you just go like, wow, like there's something I want, and also like a willingness and want to watch that person. Like there's a reason why like we can watch someone that we hate in a movie, like an evil villain, but we want to keep watching them. We don't just turn it off and be like, ew, like you're annoying, or like, ew, I don't like you. It's because they have that star quality and they bring some like sort of humanity that, we don't necessarily see otherwise. So that's a big part of it. I mean, how do you identify it in somebody? It's like sometimes it's spending time with them, sometimes it's watching performances of theirs. Sometimes you have to like take a risk and, cast that person in their first project. Like everybody is a first time actor if they're going to be an actor at some point. Sometimes it could be when they're really little, other times it can be, at any age, but like you just feel it and you just kind of and sometimes there's just you just can't like you put it into words, but everybody feels that in the room, and that's kind of what happened today. It was like everybody felt that even though maybe on paper they're not like exactly as it's written. You're just like you can't stop thinking about their performance. Any other questions?
How did you get specifically into, I know you have a strong representation of people with disabilities. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, so like I said, I was a kid actor and I would go on auditions, and it's normal to go on auditions and see people that look like you because they're casting, you're going on auditions
Specific
for
type.
the
Yeah.
role. Yeah. So, but I grew up around a lot of disability and just around a lot of diversity, but I didn't know it was like unusual to have, one of my mom's really close friends was deaf. I had somebody that I went to school with who he was misdiagnosed until he was 30 something as having CP. He has a different disability, which is like a crazy story in itself, but a disability like CP. And he was in mainstream school with me. And I just, that's who was at my birthday party. That's who went to synagogue with me. That's who our neighbors were. I never really thought there was anything unique about it until was on the other side of the casting table and I was casting and I was like, why are we seeing only able-bodied people? Why are we only seeing people of color for roles that are written as people of color? Like we were still in that place like 20 years ago. And as I moved up in the industry, I just would say to the people I worked for, like my casting directors I worked for, were like, is there anyone you think we should see for this role that we haven't seen yet? Or, would bring me in as like a collaborator at that point, not just like an assistant, putting schedules together. And I was like, yeah, why haven't we seen anyone disabled for the friend at the birthday party? Why are we not seeing the crush be a person of color unless it's written as such, all of those sorts of things. And it was like with people with certain things, there were actors that were being represented, they just weren't getting in the rooms for those roles. For people with disabilities, there just wasn't opportunity being presented, so nobody was representing those actors. And they weren't being welcomed into training programs, and they weren't getting the training. So, what my casting directors I worked for would say to me was like, "Great." Like, yes, that's such a good idea. Bring someone in with a disability for that role. And I was like, awesome. So I would call agents that we work with, and they're like, we don't represent anybody with a disability. Like maybe this person we represent's brother or sister, and they did one episode of Sesame Street and they waved and walked away, but like they're not ready to be, so I was like, oh, like what do you like? Okay, like I'm gonna try to bring them in, but like somebody that has no experience isn't gonna stand up to a person that, has been auditioning and acting for years. So I just saw that we needed to make a change there and show that casting wants to meet you, but also how do we get those actors the training and an opportunity so that they're ready to come in those rooms? And that's been a big part of my mission. But also, I want people with disabilities to see themselves on my side of the table because you shouldn't be coming into a room that you're not a part of, just like you shouldn't be coming onto a set where you're the only person of said identity, whatever that identity is. So that's really important to me is just creating a more inclusive industry and making it accessible for everybody to be a part of this industry. And it's just kind of snowballed from there because once you kind of have an expertise and I've tried to make myself really accessible to my peers when they have questions and never make anybody feel stupid for using the wrong terminology or not understanding how WISAC could be accessible or how audition sides could be accessible, like making sure that they're, someone who's low vision can use them on a screen reader, like different things like that. So I've just kind of become a resource in that space. And what I found is that kids and family media is a really great space to bring a lot of inclusivity from the jump, because if that's what you see when you're a kid, if the first content you're consuming is inclusive, that's going to be your expectation and your wish for everything you watch. You're not going to stand for content that's cast inauthentically. You're going to turn it off. You're not going to want to watch something like that. That's not going to intrigue you because that's not what it's not palatable to you. It's not of interest. So it's just like to me also like that's why I really think kids and family media like having good storytelling, good creative, like it makes a difference. Like that makes you want to consume good media the rest of your life. Like there is something to it, and there is a reason why, like like Miss Rachel is really catchy, like what she sings. And she's a trained singer. Like her husband was the music director for Aladdin on Broadway, and so we have all these weird overlaps because I cast Blue's Clues and you, and Josh De La Cruz was an Aladdin. But he's a great example too of like when we brought that show back, the idea was like, let's put someone that we haven't seen in a role like this. And we looked only at people of color and women of all backgrounds. But it was really important to us because you weren't seeing women in roles like that. You were only seeing these like guys playing, like the Mr. Rogers and that kind of stuff. And were the Wiggles, like those were all of the, competitive content at the time. And we weren't seeing like strong females that could be like alone with this in this kind of a space. So we tested women and men for that role. And it was great. And Josh was amazing. But like they didn't like Josh at first. They thought that his look was, they couldn't see past his like he had like a bad haircut. They couldn't see past that. So part of my job as a casting director was being like, okay, like let's spend
Right, let's
$150
get
and
him
have
a haircut.
yeah, we're gonna have a stylist at the network test anyway. So like let's have the stylist there for an extra hour to do a little bit more hair with him or like do different hair looks with him for us and see what works because we're gonna have him there all day anyway. It's not like we're not booking him because like a hairstyle, like a stylist minimum is a lot more than 150, but like yeah, let's just add an hour to his day, whatever, like not a
Right.
big deal. So like that's part of like the out of the box thinking a casting director has to have sometimes is like seeing beyond a bad haircut or seeing beyond one bad performance or awkward encounter that someone might have with someone because also like he was a theater performer at that point. So they were kind of like some people were feeling like his performance was too big. Some people were like, oh, it works for kids and family, TV. And we had a lot of cooks in the kitchen with a project like that. Like Steve Burns, who was the original Steve, was involved. So it's like he has an idea of who's going to be playing the next him. So, there's a lot of egos and creative personalities that go into casting. So part of our job is kind of having that like putting our thinking cap on differently for somebody. They're like, okay, like, why don't we try this? Or what happens if we do this? Or why don't we try working with him on this? And clearly he was great. I mean, the show just won an Emmy last weekend. They're really they did incredible work with that show from like the jump, like having Josh, I think really made a difference. But I think having really good actors in kids and family content is really important because, especially with that, it's like you're acting against yourself. It's so hard because that's an example of a hybrid show where it's live action and animation. So, like, that animation is not there for him to watch. They're going to animate after, and he's talking like a golf ball. It's hard.
The Blue's Clues guy, in case we
Yeah,
lost.
the Blue's Clues guy. Exactly.
I know during COVID, a lot of the like in-person auditions became more online, like you were saying about the self-tapes became more videos. Is that still kind of remained, or has it gone back into in-person? Like, how is that now?
Most of the way it's kind of shifted is that auditions, so before times, everything was done in person. Nothing was done via self-tape unless you were out of town or you were like based elsewhere and there were self-tapes, but like if you lived in New York or LA, you were going in person for that first round audition. Since then, we kind of figured out, and my husband's probably like right behind me and gonna start laughing, but I was like, my job is over. I'm never gonna work again. Casting is over because everything had to be in person. That was my training at that point for like 15 years. But we, started doing self-tapes and we can see a lot more actors if we do self tapes for that first round. Then from there, we do callbacks, sometimes in person, sometimes over Zoom. But I don't think we'll ever go back to in person being the first round of auditions. Because honestly, that's a waste of time for actors in a lot of ways and for us. And we can see a lot more people. I mean, again, the drop off, like I was talking about, if I put out 300 audition requests, the drop off going down to 100, I never had that with in-person auditions. I mean, I couldn't see 300 people, but if I put out, say, 20 appointments, I probably would have one or two no-shows or like last minute reschedules. Like, say my session, so my days at Nickelodeon were I would be in the morning and like be watching tape, like watching self-tapes from people out of town, having creative calls, development meetings, and then my afternoons every afternoon, because a lot of what we did, and I guess I had some sessions in the morning too, if it was adults, but if it was kids, I was in session from, 3 to 6:30 every day. And I could only see however many actors can fit in 3 to 6:30. Like if an agent's saying, oh, please see this person, I mean, I'll try to squeeze them in, but I can't do that for everybody because then I would be there till 10 o'clock at night, which did happen sometimes. But it was it was like impossible to see as many actors as I see now. There was, like I said, less no shows, but you couldn't see all of those people. So there is something to that being in the room. And I know for actors, they miss that. I miss that. I miss directing people in person. But I do get exposed to more actors now because I can see 100 people for that role instead of 25. I mean, that's a huge difference. But like the callbacks I had today, I had an actor who I've been like seeing so much for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years. I'd never met them in person, and I had a callback with them today, and that was really fun. And then there's another actor that had a callback today who I've worked with like 5 times, and I've met in person twice. I feel like we know each other super well, but like that's it. So
Yeah.
there's something nice to getting to be in person, but from just like the standpoint of getting our jobs done and also how much is done with people like now there's just content being done everywhere. It would be kind of impossible. Like I had one project where I ended up telling somebody else that like I told the casting director or that I told sorry the producer to hire a different casting director because it was going to be a lot of in-person needs in New Mexico. And I was like, I can't leave my kids for like weeks. I could go for like a few days, but I was like, you really are going to need people in person for that. Like it was more of like a street casting scenario. But in general, everything's done on self tapes and people can be anywhere, which is great because also, like, what are the
That
actors in the mix?
talking about representation, that really does open it up more,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And like, if an actor's working on another project, like I saw an actor yesterday for the project I had callbacks for today who's doing a project in San Diego right now, like, I could still see them without it being weird because before it was like, you're going to do Zoom, like, that was a little bit weird.
Interesting.
Um, and then, yeah, is it harder or easier to pick the right person? That's funny because I should have a really like definitive answer, but I don't think I think sometimes it's easier from just like a pure numbers perspective, but other times it's harder because it's like you're not in the room with the person. You don't get that like feel and you kind of like waffle a little bit on who's the right person when you don't have that like in-person knowledge of them.
Is it right to say that like a lot of the back to the question of how do you identify star quality, it's a lot in the energy in the room,
Yeah.
right? So like if
Yeah.
you're not in the room to read the energy, it's a little bit harder, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, and it works in both directions. Like some people are really good at self-tapes and not as good actors. Other people are really bad at self-tapes or like awkward, a little bit awkward in self-tapes. Some people give just like a really good feel of who they are on a self-tape, and other people are just like all business. And you're like, ugh, I don't know if you have that star power. And for some roles, I don't care if you have star power, honestly. Like if it's a one-time guest role and you're just kind of in and out, like I don't really need star power, but I come from a network. So I come from, being at a network for so many years, and everything you do when you're at a network is really star power propeller related. Like we weren't casting the day players. We would hire outside casting directors to cast those roles, the smaller roles. We were casting the stars. So like and a good example is like on Victorious, which was one of the first projects I worked on. Like I cast Ariana Grande, I cast Elizabeth Gillies, I cast all of the big roles with Josh Dela Cruz. I cast Josh. But then like you'll see a little like person come in for one episode. I would approve that person and I would give ideas of who I wanted them to see for that person, but I wouldn't be running the actual session. That kind of changed during COVID because everything was self-taped, but just from like you can only be in so many places at once sort of a thing before you couldn't do that. So for these big roles, like I I needed to like know that they were going to be a star because if you're going to be someone on Nickelodeon, it's not just coming and doing your job and doing that show. It's also hosting at the Kids' Choice Awards. It's, being an ambassador for some sort of a pro-social thing, like doing like big events that get press and being able to speak, as a voice that kids look up to. It's more than just playing a role that we watch once and go home. Like the idea is that you are a star and they want to build the brand around you. And then they want to have like young Dylan from the Young Dylan show. He's also on the NFL show as a host. They want to build more content with you and kind of make you a part of that like star family. So it's a much bigger lift than just being the actor who does it once. Like that's just not what it is.
Any questions from the group? Is the vision of building a brand often part of the early stages when casting?
It's a great question. It depends on the project, but in general, yes. It's like if it's something where like they want to have more than just like it's not just a movie. If it's a series or something where like the idea is there's going to maybe be consumer products or like a live show that one day tours, like something like Paw Patrol. It's like Paw Patrol is a bad example because they replace those kids all the time, which is a whole other element of that, which is also a lot of the casting I would do. It would be recasting when like kids would age out. Um, but if you are looking to build a brand, it's like you are looking for a star. You are looking like something like Stranger Things. I don't think it's like the concept is like so brilliant. It's that like you're compelled by the storytelling within the acting. Like the actors are compelling and they're not like your typical beautiful kids. Like Gaten Matarazzo is like a great example of like, he has a palate disorder. Like he's not your normal whatever star that you would see, but you're like, gosh, he is just like I want to watch him and he's amazing. And that ensemble and like that show wouldn't be the same if they recast it. Like they're the brand. Like they're such an integral part of it. And they're all having incredible careers because they're all great actors, but that is a brand. It's you think of them, you don't just think of like the storylines, you also think of the cast, and that's like a huge part of that show, and that also makes them indispensable. So every year they can renegotiate their contract in a way that other projects, if they like something like Grey's Anatomy, people come and go all the time. That's not the appeal of that show. I think it was, but same with the soap opera. That's not the appeal of that show. So, when you're really like, there's different types of content to work on, but like to me, building that like iconic nostalgia type of show is really cool. Like Friends, like that's a brand. Like
Or
the
like Boy
characters are,
Meets World?
yeah, like and that's why like when they did the spin-off, like they needed them back, like and that's really cool. Full House is a great example, like with Fuller House. Like they have people back on that show who aren't even acting anymore, but like they're part of people's childhood and nostalgia, and like people cling to those characters.
Cool. Thank you so much. I don't want to
Of
keep,
course.
I know people are like, I have to go do homework.
Okay, go do homework. Homework is important.
Did anybody have questions that we didn't get to? All good? Danielle, thank you so
Of
much.
course.
Such a pleasure
Thank
to see
you.
you again.
Yeah, great to see you. Great questions, guys.
Hugs to the babies.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night. Bye.
Bye bye.